guys, welcome to another 5 minutes tutorial. Today we're going to be looking at advanced materials and creating some really nice looking materials using instances so that we can create the same look to all our models and features across the whole thing. So you know how sometimes you get in a crappy game off of Games Jolt, how some textures look like they've been done nicely and other textures just look crappy. This way we can make everything look uniform and really nice. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open a new project because I seem to have filled my previous 5-minute shoots project up with crap. So this one I'm just going to call it material instances. Okay, and we're going to add starter content, and it's going to be we'll call it first person, and we'll just get rid of all the crap. Okay, so create project. Okay guys, so we've got our new project open, and the first thing we're going to do is head to our content browser. I've got mine positioned at the bottom, but just look for the little tab with content browser. I'm going to right click, create a new folder, and I'm going to call this material instances. You can call it whatever you want, but I like to keep things relevant to how they are. So right click again, go ahead and create a material, and I'm going to call this material parent, because then each of the instances of materials are going to be child materials. Go ahead and open this up. So the first thing we can see in here is the material parent itself, the actual thing that we're going to plug parameters into and then control them from each of the instances that we create. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and create a texture parameter 2D. And that is as opposed to this, which is just a texture or a singular texture object, things like that. We don't want those. We want the parameter so we can affect it through instances. I'm just going to call this one diffuse, and then I'm going to control copy and control V that to get my normals, and just in case I want normals, and I'm just going to rename this to NRM, which is what I always call my normals, just NRM. That has texture in there already for some reason. Okay, so you can see here as I go and affect this, it has some sort of texture on there already, and it's just pre-selecting me a texture. Plug that straight into normals, and this is a pretty basic texture. This is going to be not very exciting. It's the default texture that's there. And it looks pretty crappy. Okay, now just to note, there are a couple of ways that we can resize this and rescale this. If we got a 4x4 box, this is going to stretch that one image or that one texture to 4x4. So we could use texture coordinates, and I could reset that to I don't know, 4x4. And that would, and then plug that into there and there, and that would rescale that. And you can see here in the texture that it's now, instead of being a single, it's 4 long by 4 wide, which would fit across our object. And you can see you've got much more definition there. Obviously, you do have issues with things like tiling, so you can see differences in random patterns. Like this patch repeats itself many times, which we don't actually want. So I'm just going to get rid of that. Okay, so the thing with creating nice, decent quality textures is it's about creating things that you can change to make it look more. So one wall wouldn't be exactly the same as another. If you're in a darker section, you might want to change the tint on it to a darker color. So we're just going to go ahead and start looking at how to affect some of these things. The easiest way is hold down, press S, and then click on the screen, and it's going to create me a parameter. Just hold down S on your keyboard and then left click on the screen, and it creates this parameter here. And we can just, it's a default value, 0 to 1,000, a million, or whatever you want. I'm going to plug that into metallic, and then I'm going to control copy that and control V it 2 more times, and that's going to be for my specular and my roughness. Okay, so let's just go specular and roughness. So now just looking down here, the default value is 000. If I wanted that to be metallic looking, I could just chuck a 1 in there and it's going to come up with some, there you go, the metallic sheen. And anywhere in between there, 0 and 1 is just going to knock it down to 1.6 for now. The specular is obviously the light bounce, so let's just chuck that up a little as well. Let's see how that goes. Then obviously if it's shiny and there's light bounce on it, then we don't want too much roughness, but I'm going to chuck a little bit in as well just to show you. You can see there it's much more faded and with that roughness in there. Okay, right, so the default texture in here, I don't want that to be that, so I'm going to go, we're going to move this over to, we're actually going to do this in instances, but for now I'm just going to use the clay beveled, because you can actually see we get an actual normal map rather than using the same texture 2 times, which you really don't want. And that should update in a second. There you go, so you can see there's shine on it, so it's got this metallic feature, and if I just roll that all the way down to, well, actually 0, that'll update again. We do still have specular on here though, so you're going to get that white light shine. So if I knock that down to 0 as well, and then you can see there's absolutely nothing on there shine wise, and then the roughness is quite rough. Okay, so let's just add a tiny little bit of specular to this, just because in the real world you do get a little bit, even with the roughest objects you do get a tiny little bit of shine. So there you go, you got some, looks like nice slightly wetted bricks. Okay, awesome. So the next thing we want to do is we want to affect the, we're going to want to, let's affect the normals. So we're going to want to hold down M on the keyboard and click in here, and we're just going to make a multiply. And in fact, no, do you know what, let's do it with a lerp. Use something cool. We're going to lerp multiple. No, we're not. We're going to there you go. Okay, so the first thing we do is we're going to pull the A into there, and then, okay, so we're going to want to create a constant vector 3, which is the RGB coordinates. So basically, just quickly open it up, and I'm going to go ahead and just set that up to there. In fact, no, let's just 0 that. 0 that, and chuck that at 1. Okay, and that gets us a proper solid blue colour. Pop that into there. And then in the alpha, I'm going to want another parameter. And that means that it's just going to blend between the two. So this parameter here will affect, the value of this parameter here is going to affect the blend between the blue and the normal, so it'll be 0 and 1. Okay, you can see here if I just when it wants to update, and there you see. Now what that's done is it's just flattened out, and in fact if I went over 1 and I went to say 4, it would inset the bricks and the mortar would be sticking out. There you go. You can see there's a much more defined, much more highly defined set of bricks. So you're asking, why would we do this? Well, we do this for a number of reasons. One, because it's more efficient. Rather than having lots and lots and lots of different textures for different variations of height map and normal map, lots of different variations of texture, we use this so that we just create the one texture and then use it in different ways, and we affect just certain parameters of that. And we can do that from a child instance. So now we have this set up. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to comment all of this out, and I'm going to call this norms. These I should have renamed. I'll do that in a bit because we're probably running short on time as we normally do. Okay, we'll call these params. And then there's diffuse. And we could add a tint to this as well, but I'm not going to do that right now. However, I am going to quickly just make a multiply, and by holding down M on the keyboard and clicking in screen, and I'm going to multiply the diffuse by another param, and I'm going to hook that straight into the emissive color, which is there. So what's going to happen is, if we have an emissive color, if we want it to glow, I can set this up to be like 12, and that should, in theory, glow like a motherfucking sun. There you go. Awesome. And then obviously if I drop that right down to 2, it'll glow slightly less. To update, there you go, it glows slightly less, but it has a bit of glow to it. And if I drop it down to say 0.04, it will virtually not glow at all. There'll be virtually no lighting at all. And we call this the lighting of it, and you could use this section, this part here, you can either leave it at 0, or if you're texturing an object like a light bulb or a light beam strip or something along those lines, or something you want to glow, if it's an object in game that you want to say walk through a trigger, and once you get within a certain distance, then you want to reset that emissive color to glow so as it highlights it to the player. Then this would be a great way of doing it. All you'd literally do is create a blueprint interface between the object that has material applied to it and your your player character, and then you just reference that emissive parameter. This parameter here, you reference that from the trigger, so on a trigger enter, it then sets that up, and it will step it up to make it glow, which is great. It was really handy, really useful, and it's probably the most efficient way of doing it. Okay, so that is that and all. So now I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate. In fact, no, I'm not. I'm going to create a material instance of this, and we're going to call this material child. Okay, so now the material child is this here, and you can see in the parameter groups, I've got, this is the parent, okay, and in the actual groups themselves, I've got the scalar parameters, which I can then just whack up, which that's the emissive color. There's the texture parameters. I can change that to anything else I feel like, so I could just go down to, I don't know, bush. There you go, and that just turns it into turns the texture into bush. You can see the normal maps there still, so if I again selected that and went down to bush for the normal, you can see there that this now has this bush effect on it, the bush texture on it, which is not really great for what we want, but it's there. Now, this scalar parameter here, because it says none, and all the other ones are called none as well, back in the parent, you'll notice that it's just a 1, and each of these values will end up being the same. Now, that's a problem. So that's because somebody, aka me, didn't rename them all. So we're just going to call this the emission. And you can probably tell what I'm going to do now. Metallic spec and rough. Okay, so if I just apply and update these now, hopefully in my child, yep, there you go. You can see now all of these. Wish my screen was bigger. Scalar parameter values, I have different values, so I can, when it updates, I can, and you can reference all of these from blueprints or through C++, depending on what you are after, and you can Hewnstone. There you go. So that would be the normal. You can see there how that affects that in real time virtually, which is great. So that's at 1, and then when 1 is down into negatives, it really starts to deepen down, and that looks pretty reasonable. Obviously the metallic, the emission, I take the metallic down to virtually nothing. The emissions, I'm going to take that down to virtually nothing as well, and you can see how well this looks already. This is really good. Okay, I'm quite pleased with that. So just going to drop that down to in the negs, and you can see, in fact no, that needs to have a little specular. And there you can see that this actually looks quite nice. It looks like wet hewn stone, which is how it's supposed to look, and that's essentially how you create an instance of a material, and you can reuse that, and I can reapply this to anything I wanted. So I could apply this to any object I liked in scene. Let's just quickly go back into scene. Let's just apply my child into there, and I can create from this one. I can create a material instance there, and I'm just going to quickly pop into this one. I'm going to make ceramic tile. No, that's not the one. I wanted the. Yep, that is right. And then in the norm, we're just going to go ceramic tile norm. We're going to click the right stupid thing. Obviously the emissions, we don't really need anything on emissions, but the metallic, I'm going to bop that up to about 3. And in the specular, I'm going to shut that right up to there so it's properly nice and shiny. Quickly save it. And then we're going to chuck that material there, on material instance there, onto this block, and you can see how nice that looks in comparison. I mean, it's not very well lined up, but that's not the point. In comparison to this one here. So this is great for exactly what we wanted. Okay, anyway, that will wrap up this one. In the next episode, we're going to be looking at some more in-depth material instances and how we can use this properly in game to affect a change in scene. So we'll probably look at creating an object with one of these material instances applied to it, change the emission to make it glow when you get within a certain distance, and then reduce it back out to 0 when you step away and outside the bounds of the external collider. Okay, anyway, as always, any suggestions, leave them down below in the comments. Otherwise, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.